This is Dave, the guru, and another tutorial using Gamesalad. In this video, we're going to go through positioning the paddle and moving it around on the scene. As you can see, I've added another row of bricks here, and I've neatened things up, so you can go ahead and do that at any time and then follow along with the video. I've neatened up my walls. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and grab the image for our paddle here. We're just going to click on it and we'll drag it up into the actor's palette and release it, and this is going to create an actor for us with the image already contained in it. And since this was scaled down as well, we're just going to go ahead in there and we're going to go ahead and scale it up in the size, and we'll double its size. So we're going to do 128 by 32. So we'll just back out now and we'll go ahead and drag our actor onto the scene, and we'll give it a fairly rough position of where we want to put it. Now, before we begin positioning things and going in and doing some code, we need to understand how things work in the universe here in the scene. So everything going up and down, no matter which way the position of the device is, the y-axis is always up and down, and the x-axis is always left to right. And how things count is by pixels. So this aspect ratio, or the ratio of size or number of pixels on the y-axis on an iPad in portrait mode, is 1024, and on the x-axis it's 768. So we have 1024 pixels going this way, and we have 768 pixels going that way. Now, absolute zero of both positions start down in this lower left-hand corner. So at this very corner in here, this first pixel way down here is 0. 0 on the X and 0 on the Y. And so from here, for the X position, we would start at 0, and we got to this corner, we would be at 768. And if we started here, down here on the Y-axis, and we went all the way up to the top, we would count linearly up to 1024. And so when we start to manipulate things and go in and look for information from the system, we need to be working with the X and the Y axis. And that's how they're going to be referred to, not as up and down or left and right. So it's vital that we understand those things before we move forward. So now that we understand how things are measured and incremented on the scene, we can go ahead into our actor and start manipulating it. So one of the first things that we're going to want to do is, since we don't really want this thing to move on the y-axis, we want this paddle to just basically work across the x back and forth and not up and down. We want to actually freeze the position on the y of this particular actor here, this paddle. And so what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and open it up here on the scene, and we're just going to come over and take a peek at its Y position as we see it here. And so let's just go ahead and round it off, as we don't want to work in decimal places. And we'll just go ahead and change it to 120. And when we do this, it'll move on the scene to that position. So we'll go ahead and just deal with the Y as 120. And it's always good to have a little notepad with you, just to write this information down so you don't have to keep going back and peeking into the actor. So we're going to go ahead now that we've set the position on the Y at 120, and we're going to go ahead and do the coding from our prototype actor, as this will get transferred into the child actor down there, anything we do as we discuss prototypes. So one of the things we want to do is we're going to go down to the physics tab, and we're actually going to uncheck movable, basically because we're not going to use the physics engine to move it. We're going to do something called the constraining. And constraining actually overrides the physics engine and forces whatever actor or whatever thing to be constrained to a particular thing in the device. So on this, we're going to be doing it to the mouse position when we actually move it, or your finger on a touch device is actually considered the mouse. So mouse and touch are similarly the same thing in terminology in Gamesalad. So we're going to go ahead over and click on this Behaviors tab. And these behaviors are basically where we begin to do our logic programming in Gamesalad. In Gamesalad, we do logic programming. So let me try to give you a brief, real quick example of logic so you can kind of get your head around it. When you go to get in your car, you get on the handle. If the door is locked, you unlock the door. And you need the right key. A lot of them are wireless or the old mechanical way if you don't have the right key. So you have to put the key in, turn it, unlock the door, open the door, sit down, put on your seatbelt, put the key in the ignition, make sure it's in park because it won't start if it's in one of the gears. Turn the key to the start position, start the car, and let the key off. It turns out of the start position. That is a real-world series of logic events. All these events need to happen and be in their certain order for you to start your car. Well, logic programming works very much the same way. We're watching different bits of information in the computer, and we're telling certain things to happen. We're telling the computer to do certain things based on particular conditions. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab one of these logic behaviors where we're going to actually dig into the machine and look at different pieces of information. And this is our window. Behaviors are a window into access and reading and writing to those pieces of information. So we're going to go ahead and grab a constrained attribute. And we're going to constrain something to it. And all these come with a little description here to the right. There's also definitions on the Gamesalad website. And as you begin to go along in programming, you'll begin to understand what all these different things do. So don't feel, if you feel overwhelmed, it's okay. This is just a beginner start. I have other videos for those who wish to continue or are really seriously interested in game development. I really recommend my GS Logic series, which will really begin to teach you how to do logic programming more extensively. So for now, just go with the flow, relax, let's make a game. And you'll have plenty of time to figure all these other things out in great depth. So don't if you feel overwhelmed, it's okay. We've all been there. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to constrain the position of this actor on the scene, this paddle, to our Y position that we wrote down. So we're going to go ahead and come into the attribute browser. And this is where we access all the different pieces of information that's available to us from the system. So we're going to go ahead and click this little box here in the first part of this, and we're going to go into the attribute browser, and we're going to go ahead to the devices tab, and we're going to go ahead, we're going to go ahead into the paddle itself. This is all the attributes of the paddle that you see over here. So we're going to go into the paddle, and we're going to select its position, and we're going to select its Y position, okay? And we're going to constrain its Y position to, and we're just going to type in a number here, and we wrote down, we're going to constrain it to 120. So what this is going to do is this is going to force the computer to keep the position of that paddle forced at 120 pixels above 0, so from the bottom. So this is going to basically, it's like nailing something in place where we're going to fix this exactly to that spot. We're going to go ahead, and now we want to move it left to right. So let's just go back for a minute. So now we can see we have our walls here. Now since the ball's going to work off of physics, it will actually be constrained inside the physics engine and will respect collisions. And it'll bounce off these walls and off these bricks and etc. and off this paddle. But since we're using a constraints to move this paddle, we're actually going to override the physics engine. We're going to be outside the physics engine. So therefore, we're going to need to do a little bit of a calculating. So now let's talk about measuring actors in Gamesalad. So let me just click on this actor. And as you can see, it's got an outline with circles and things, and that's where we can stretch and make things scalable in here. We can rotate them with this handle. But what I want you to key in on is how we measure things for position in Gamesalad. Right at this very middle circle here in the direct center of an actor is how we measure its position in Gamesalad. So when you go in and double click on that, like we did, and we look at this position information here, what we're looking at is the X and Y coordinates of that exact center. So that's what this information is telling us. So when we want to move something in Gamesalad, we need to take into account that we're looking at the direct center. So if we're to drag it over here, we want to stop it right at the edge of this wall. We don't want it to go outside the wall. So its position that we want it to stop at is not out here at 0. It's going to be actually in here, which is half its width. So we've made this 128 pixels wide. So half of it means that it's 64 pixels wide. So which means that when we make our first stop position here going this way, we want it to actually stop at 64 pixels, not at 0. And we're going to have the same way for the other side. When we do the other side, we want to make sure we take away 64 pixels from the edge when we stop it. So now our scene is 768 pixels. So that means we don't want this to travel any farther than 704 pixels, and we don't want it to go any farther on the left-hand side than 64 pixels. All right, so now that we've got that together, let's go ahead back into our actor here, and we're going to grab another constraint attribute. And in here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to say constrain self position X to, and now we're going to come up here and you see this little E symbol here. This is the expression editor. Now, I don't want you to get frightened about this. We're going to be doing a little bit of math, and we're going to be using a little bit of functions in here. And the reason why I want to show you this is because you need to understand in game programming that you're going to have to do math. Even though Gamesalad is a logic-based environment for building games, as you progress and as you learn and you want to do more difficult and harder things, it's going to involve math. Some of it is going to involve calculus, trigonometry, a lot of trigonometry, vectors for really complex movements in circles and in certain patterns. You're going to use a lot of basic adding and subtracting, multiplying, things like that. So just be aware that there is a math component to, even though it's not coding as you might know it in C++ or JavaScript, where you have the syntax, there's still a level of math and things like that that are going to be involved in this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a minimum, a maximum, and a minimum equation here. So you may not understand it, but it's okay. Just follow along. We're getting our feet wet. And I'll try to explain it as best I can so you have kind of an understanding going forward on what we're doing here. So we're going to come down in our expression editor, and you're going to see there's a lot of stuff with math involved in here and words where you can basically build strings in here and match information and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the max function first, and this is going to set our max parameters. It's going to tell the machine that don't go any farther, constrain it, but don't go any farther than the number we're going to tell you. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go ahead and we need to back up to this first bracket. And we use brackets to condense or contain information and segregate it so that the computer can do it linearly and know certain information is separate from others. Especially when we're adding different types of information together to get an output, and which is what we're going to do here. So now that we've got our max, we're going to go ahead and add our min information in here as well. And then from our min information, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to back up to this first bracket. Now we're going to do a simple math equation in here. And anytime we do a math equation inside an expression, we need to bracket it off so the computer knows, hey, add this before you move on. So we're going to add another open bracket. And then we're going to go ahead and we know that since we're dealing with the minimum, we know that our half our player is 64 pixels wide. And then we're going to add a plus sign. So I'm going to say 64 plus, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to come to this triangle, which is going to open up that editor like we were in over here, that's going to give us access to the information that's pre-existing in the machine. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to say constrain it to devices. And we want to, since we're going to be using the mouse to manipulate it, we want to actually constrain it to the position of our mouse. So we're going to go ahead up and select the mouse, its position, and we're dealing with the X position. Now we're going to close this off with a close bracket. Now, as you can see in here, we've closed off, okay, this math equation. So we've told the computer we're going to give you max information. The first thing we're giving you is the minimum information. We put a bracket because we have to add another piece of information after that because there's X and Y. So we basically said, okay, stop here now after this and do this math equation. So it's going to do that and it'll get its minimum position there. And then we're going to go ahead and add a comma as was previously in there. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to give it our max position, which is 702. And we're going to close this off. And then we're going to tell it, we're going to add the comma, and then we're going to tell it the Y position, we're not going to give you any information for it because we're already constraining it. So we're not doing anything with the Y, so the Y is just going to be 0. It's not going to be anything. So let me take 1 second and just grab another constraint attribute, and let me show you a couple things while we have this open. So let's just go ahead and let's move this up here. And let's go ahead and open the expression editor again, and let's bring this stuff right down here. And let's see if I can't break this out for you a little more, just so you can see how this does match what we originally started with. So let's go ahead and we'll just grab the max function, and we'll go ahead and grab the min function. So now you can see where the brackets are and where the commas are in here. So we have our max function and then our first bracket, and then we're telling it this is the X position. So we're saying, all right, the X position is going to have a minimum and a maximum. So we've got the X position here. We backed it up, and we just put that information in here. So our minimum is going to be 64 plus, okay, and we've left out the Y, which we don't need. And then we put the comma in there for the maximum, which we've jumped. So we skipped the Y, and we just went with a minimum here. So let me show you this. So we did this. We got rid of that, okay? And we have our max, and then we went into our minimum. So let's do it this way. Let's go ahead, and I'll make this out so you can see it like this. Okay, and let's get rid of that. And now let's move this stuff here. Okay. And that's essentially what we've done here is, and as you can see, this would require no extra brackets because we've closed this off here. So everything we do something, it has to be closed in brackets. So essentially what we've done is move this around a little bit and added it up here. And as you can see, I hope this starts to, in your mind a little bit, you can just kind of see how things went along. Let me change that to a Y. Oops, sorry. Change that to a Y, close bracket. So essentially that's what we've done here. We've added this min expression in here and then given ourselves the XY on the outside. So you can kind of see how this progressed, how this went along, how we took those two things and we kept their structure intact and we created this. So don't, like I said, once again, don't be overwhelmed. It's okay. Just want to try to give you a little bit of clearing up. So we're going to go ahead and close that, and we'll get rid of this. We'll delete that. And so now let's go ahead and we'll go back onto the scene. And now let's go ahead up and do a quick save. If you haven't saved your project, you can do it as save or save as. So we'll do a save, but if you were doing it, you would do a save. If you're saving the first time, it's going to give you the save position and then tell you where to store it. So I always try as I go along to save, because you do a lot of work and something could happen. It could crash. The power could go out. So I always try to save my work as I go along so that I don't lose anything. So now we can go ahead up to our preview, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to see that now we have our actor constrained to the mouse inside the specific area that we want. Now don't be concerned if we go out of here, you're going to see it stops short. That's because the mouse position now is way out here. When we're actually in the game, this is the edge of the device. So you're not going to be able to, if you're touching the screen, you're not going to be able to go outside like that. It's not going to register as you'll be off the screen. So it works fine, as you can see inside here. So we have it constrained now, and we have it into its position where we want it to go, and we've kept it inside our walls, even though the walls aren't doing anything in regards to this, because we've constrained it to the mouse position. We're overriding physics, and we've now got our platform working as we need it. So in the next phase, we'll go ahead and we'll get our ball actor in there, and we'll get that moving around, and we'll work with a little more logic, and then we'll get into breaking bricks and keeping score and all of that. So you can find me on the forums under the name Lost Oasis Games. This is Dave, the Guru. I'll see you in the next video.